First of all, thank you for being here, all of you. And I would like to thank Trace Foundation for putting this event together and having me here. I really appreciate that. It's quite an experience. I'm so honored to be in the company of some great linguists who have dedicated their career to the development of minority languages and also understanding this very complex activity of, if you will, managing language and language planning and policy and, as I said, promoting and developing minority languages. So thanks again to Trace Foundation for holding this great event. I will be talking about Kurdish language, particularly in Iraqi Kurdistan, and I will have the $1 million question. When it comes to language selection, whose variety should be chosen, for whose nation, for whose identity, and whose rights should be considered. And I think it's a difficult and complex question, but I'll do my best to illustrate this in the context of the Kurds. So I will provide a brief background about the Kurds and the land, Kurdistan, and also the language Kurdish. And I will then focus particularly on my subject of study, which is Iraqi Kurdistan. And now you will find out why there is such a thing as Iraqi Kurdistan, and Iranian Kurdistan, and then Turkish Kurdistan, and Syrian Kurdistan, and perhaps one could say these days diasporic Kurdistan. And I'm sure it's not unique by any means in this globalized world. Then I will, if time permitting, I would like to consider a few theoretical notions and concepts about language planning. Perhaps that would help me and us, hopefully, to understand a little bit more what is happening in Iraq and why in the Kurdish region. And then I would like to revisit the debate over language selection with the help of some of these concepts. The map that you're looking at, this is Kurdistan. It is literally means Kurdistan, the land of the Kurds. I thought I had another map, but it looks like it's not there. That is fine. But you may wonder, the first question is, has there ever been a unified single state called Kurdistan? And the answer is no. However, during the Ottoman and Persian empires, there were Kurdish dynasties and principalities all over that region, all over here. Many of them in Turkey, then some in Iraq and in Iran. But then in 1925, in the aftermath of the First World War, then it was Kurdistan officially divided among these four nation states: Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. But the point that I would like to make is this really. There are at least three objectives, or at least there should be, in language planning. One is acknowledging the importance of language as a constituent in nation building. A nation needs a language to communicate, or languages. Recognizing the primacy of language as a central element in personal and national identity. And then taking into account the significance of language and linguistic rights, both collective and individual language rights. So, to that end, I examine how these objectives inform language variety selection in Kurdistan, discuss the challenges that language planners in that region face, and entertain the possible courses of action that might be taken along with their potential implications. So the background, I will talk about Kurds and Kurdistan a little bit and then get to the main focus of my study, and then I will consider some theories and then a conclusion. This is the map when I didn't see and I realized that I didn't have the right slides. This map shows some of the major principalities that existed during the Ottoman and Persian empires up to 1860s, and then they were wiped out by the Safavids Empire and the Ottoman Empire. Then Kurdistan, the land that we know today, inhabited mostly by the Kurds, looks like this one today, and it has looked like this since 1925, this gray area. So I talked about this and I move on. There are about 25 million Kurds, and that's an estimate by a British researcher, David McDowell. Some Kurds estimate, of course, have a higher estimate, close to 30 million. And these are all rough estimates, actually, because accurate statistics do not exist in those countries, especially when it comes to ethnicity and linguistic minorities, because such questions do not exist on the census papers. So in Turkey, about 13 million, Iran, about 6 million, and then Iraq, about 4 million, and then former Syria, 1 million, former Soviet Union, about 400,000, and then about 700,000 Kurds living in diaspora. A huge population in Germany, and then followed by Scandinavian countries, and then France, and then Britain, and of course North America, Australia, and so on. Languages in Kurdistan. There are lots of Kurdish varieties. They're all called Kurdish, but I will talk about a little bit how in recent years some of the varieties that were called Kurdish, and they called themselves Kurdish, now they call themselves a distinct linguistic minority. And that's one of the interesting cases that has come about in that region. Names change, and there are lots of factors that contribute to that labeling and naming change. And I hope I will have a chance to come back to this. And there are also some small linguistic minorities in the Kurdish areas. Turkomani is one of them, Syriac, spoken by Assyrians. There is Azerbaijani, which Azerbaijani speakers could be in towns where predominantly inhabited by the Kurds, but because it's on the border of Kurds and Azerbaijan, Kurdistan and Azerbaijan, then of course the population is mixed. And then because the Kurdish area has been ruled by the states of Turkey and Iran and Iraq and Syria, and Turkish, Persian, Arabic being the official languages of those states. Of course, there are on the borders again, or not even necessarily on the borders, there are speakers of those languages, but very small minorities in Kurdish areas. Kurdish, what is it? Well, it's the language of the Kurds. It's an Indo-European language, close to Persian, very different from Turkish and Arabic. Three main varieties: the Southern Kurdish, Central Kurdish, and Northern Kurdish. Some other people have different names for these, and I will get to this, and I hope it doesn't get too confusing. I've really done my best not to make it too confusing with these naming things, but at the same time, I have to be faithful to my research and what I see. So see if I have been able to strike a balance. So this is again a map of a greater Kurdistan. That's where Southern dialect or Southern variety is spoken. So you can tell this one right away, it splits between Iran and Iraq. So partially is in Iraq, partially is in Iran. There is the central one, and that is the one that, this is my mother tongue, and also that's the one that has been suggested. This is the majority spoken in Iraqi Kurdistan, and that's the one that has been suggested to be the official language of that region. And that's the one that has created controversies. This is we call it Central Kurdish or Sorani. And then there is Northern Kurdish, which is, you can tell it's has more speakers, and even territory-wise, it covers a much bigger territory than other varieties. However, in Iraqi Kurdistan, that's the important part. In Iraqi Kurdistan, this one is not the majority. It's the minority variety. But in the entire greater Kurdistan, it's the majority, and that has caused all these complications. So this is the border between Iran. This is the line Iran, the border line, and this is Turkey and Iraq. So you can tell over here it's the minority actually. This one is much bigger. So there is also another smaller variety in the Turkey part of Kurdistan. It's called Zazaki. This one considered themselves as Kurdish until about 10 years or so, and then I believe personally that diaspora has contributed to what Benedict Anderson at the time called long-distance nationalism, has created these kind of nationalisms within nationalisms. So now there are Zazaki nationalists who consider themselves Kurds, but in recent years consider themselves as a separate minority. And there is also this much smaller one. One could estimate the number of speakers somewhere between 100,000 to 200,000. It's a very small one, Hawrami. And it is located a little bit in northern Iraq, and I will get to that, to their petition when they asked to be recognized as a distinct linguistic minority in Iraqi Kurdistan. And then a bigger portion of it, most of the speakers live in Iran. So you can see how these borders separated these Kurds. Here is a different picture. I won't repeat this, but you can see here are the varieties: Kurmanji, Sorani, Kermashani, or Hawrami, and then Zazaki. But then they're spoken in, for example, this one, Kurmanji, which is the majority variety, spoken in Turkey and then written in Latin-based because Turkish writes in. It's a Latin-based alphabet. Then following Turkey, they write in Latin-based, if they can write. By the way, they have only been allowed to write in the language since 1992. This variety was banned legally in Turkey until 1992. So they can write it in, it's a Latin-based alphabet. In the ex-Soviet Union, it was Cyrillic-based, the same variety, but they wrote it in Cyrillic-based, and still they do. In Syria and Iraq and Iran, it's Arabic-modified alphabet. So you can imagine the complexity. Sorani, looks a better scenario if one looks for homogeneity and consistency. Sorani is in Iran and Iraq, and it is all Arabic-based in both countries, simply because Persian and Arabic write in the same alphabet. Nonetheless, it's a bit modified when it comes to Persian, that borrowed the alphabet from Arabic, and Kurds have modified their own script with some diacritics and signs and symbols. And then, so I shall move on. Another fragmentation among these varieties also has been caused by the fact that they live in different states with different languages and different cultures. And look, you can see what, Miklos yesterday alluded to this and showed a few examples actually about Hungarian, what happens when from the same language they live in different states, in different countries. For example, in Iraq, a car, English car, is called Sayara. Kurds, be it the Kurmanji speaker or the Sorani speaker or the Hawrami speaker, under the influence of Arabic, call a car, a Sayara. That's Arabic word, so they just borrowed from Arabic. In Iran,